Chris Gray, and this is Sun God, my thesis presentation. So the thesis question is, how is power conveyed through architecture, and in turn, how to make the occupant feel as powerless as possible. My favorite quote from Joseph Bedford's Histories of Architecture class is when we spoke about the French architect Etienne Louis Boulet, an architect who dreamed of the sublime. He designed cenotaphs, or tombs for those such as Isaac Newton and Hercules, monumental figures that he believed deserved monumental remembrance. Bedford described the sublime as something that is as equally beautiful as it is terrifying. So Boulet aimed to achieve this through scale, the tiny human versus the incomprehensible size of the architecture. This feeling of pure fear and awe before a structure became the core identity and aspiration of my project. So in the Nevada desert, the US military performed 928 testing operations post-World War II to further research the nuclear bomb. So this is a vague site plan. That is the tiny architecture. It's blown up and it's sited in the desert, and these orange and yellow circles are supposed to represent the craters. Hundreds of craters can still be seen pocketing these desert plains from the tests, and directly inspired by the energy-generating concept of Project Pacer, my remote nuclear harvester was realized. Buried a mile deep in the Nevada bedrock, a 13-foot stick steel alloy blast chamber is constructed to sustain a nuclear blast. So this is the hole. That's the blast chamber. A series of 50 kiloton bombs are dropped into the cavern and exploded to heat a basin of water and create steam. The steam will then power a secondary cooling loop for energy extraction using a series of turbines within the pit and the fragmented tower. So all of the mechanics of the pit, and then through the tower, there's generators. The thesis explores what architectural motions can create a sense of insignificance and lack of power in the occupant. So I'm just going to hand this model off so you can check it out. Also, the model comes out so you can play with it. Scale differentiation between the human and the factory was the first goal, but that was an easy box to check. Most of the formal exploration was intuitive, centered around the interactions between the entrance, the tower, the cantilevers, and the pit itself. I most importantly explore how all of these elements fuse together to interact with the unique program of exploding and harvesting a nuclear bomb. Aesthetically, I aim to amplify the hostility of this factory. Through my nuclear research, I found a quote from a scientist dismantling an atom bomb. They remarked that the interior parts look like a Swedish watch or a mechanical artwork, something I took heavy inspiration from. So here are some conceptual floor plans I made in probably October that significantly fed into the design of the final architecture. The unforgiving desert stretches as far as the eye can see and farther still. Jagged, sun-scorched metal that has been terrorized by the elements goes to the exterior. Daunting hallways are shrouded with deep nooks and deeper shadows. Rattling machinery lodges into the floors and walls and snakes up into the darkness. The harvester centralizes around the generator, a series of turbines that are vertically embedded into the main tower. This is the beating mechanical core of the harvester that thrives off of flame and chaos. The workers live within the indifferent machine, one entirely replaceable part to the whole. Whether it is the long, perilous journey across total darkness, the tortured metal forms, the winding, indiscernible alcoves and passages, the ceaseless choir of pipe and gear, the architecture elicits complete helplessness for workers laboring within a factory that precariously claws onto the cliffside, exploits the world's most dangerous weaponry, and survives in an environment where the infinitely powerful sun is God. And I would like to conclude with this. Let me take a sip of water first. The bomb arrives at high noon. The ropes are cut, the beast is untied. The workers carry it across the seemingly endless entrance, over the gaping void, into the maw of the harvester. Sunlight pierces through metal fenestrations, machinery murmurs through corridor after corridor. They take it past the mechanical heart of the harvest and through the sharded gateway. Under the scorching sun, they cross the final bridge to the drop-off point. The timer is set for 30 seconds. The bomb is fed to the void. A crack, a roar, the world shudders, and the harvester glows. Thank you. So yes, there is a lot to unpack. What are your first thoughts?
Can I ask just one clarification?
Of course.
The sculpt out in the model, is that actually a crater that this is in, or?
So this is over the I guess I didn't explain it in that, but it's a mile deep pit where the bomb would be dropped and then exploded in that pit filled with water.
This is a pit?
Yes, that is
in
the
the
pit.
desert?
Yes.
Gotcha. And it's, continues around?
Mhm. Yeah, that was just a section cut to kind of show the hole a little bit more.
This building are watching the bomb. This building is like on the edge of this pit.
Mhm.
The bomb goes up in the pit,
Mhm.
and they've got like front seat viewing to the bomb.
Yes, and then the main purpose of the architecture is to hold the generators that start from inside the pit and then kind of culminate within the tower itself.
Generators that do what?
To generate electricity to convert that power of the explosion into something usable besides just killing people.
So is it a testing site or is it a power plant?
It's a power plant.
It's an alternative to like decommissioning nuclear bombs. So instead of taking them apart, decommissioning them, they blow them up.
And this is just a tiny little fragment of the whole.
Yes.
Right? This is just okay.
Yeah, at first it was going to be a factory that dismantled the bombs and kind of had a graveyard in the pit, and then Ben was like, what if you explode them? And then it went from there.
You're going to explode all of America's nuclear arsenal.
It's gonna take long.
And radiation would probably destroy human existence on the planet, no?
Since they were already doing hundreds of these tests,
Get a little practical, Joseph.
since they were already doing hundreds of these tests, it was remote enough to not. I think it did cause problems, but I wasn't getting into the environmental factors as much.
It's a mile underground, Joseph. I mean,
It's not underground, it's in-ground, right? It's the pit is a mile in-ground, not underground. Okay.
It's deep.
So I had to go down there to see the plans. They're pretty small. Well, they're in the distance there. But those are what you've then printed. The same plan appears on the top here. This is the same plan as what you've got written next to sacrifice.
So yes, the structure would extrude out because I wanted to continue that metal form language. I thought it would be both a cool interior condition and symbolize that interior condition through the exterior.
Right.
And then I used the same pieces of those original metal floor plans to kind of piece together the metal windows and the support systems for the structure as well.
But you've worked out the plans for every level in this tower. So the tower in the middle, these plans are all cutting through the different levels there.
Mhm.
Yeah. Maybe just help me out. Just tell me, like, where is control cut, where is sacrifice cut, where is passage cut?
Yes. So
Just so I can try and piece together
Mhm.
the building design.
yes. So we have the main entrance. I call this space security, the first cantilever form that kind of looks over the entrance.
And that correlates to the plan there that lines up with the word.
These directly correlate, yeah.
The word security.
So security, it's touching that horizontal line that's talking about this
That
form right
one's
here.
right now.
Mhm. And then control is talking about this form that kind of this form that overlooks the main drop-off point.
Mhm.
And then the harvest refers to just the whole tower itself. And then passage was also the entrance space beneath, just as you come up through.
So you've got a series of long rectangular slab buildings that orient out, splay out in different directions, and they pivot around a kind of a tower that is their hinge. And then each one of these has a very interesting language to it around crochet that I've never really seen before. I mean, particularly the ones down in the corner, I don't know where they correlate to. But they're, it looks like you've got this mass that you're carving into. Is this, how do you see the construction of this thing?
Yeah, so this was the first study model. This came after our initial collage. So I was inspired by brutalism for these massive, whether they were concrete or, since I knew I was going to be in the desert, these like sandstone monolithic structures. And then, transitioning to a metal model with a lot thinner bits, I started to realize that maybe the extreme mass wasn't necessary. And then this final model kind of resolved the axes of entrance, drop-off point, and tower, and then used my own language, inspired by the mechanical artwork, to use those different pieces and kind of paste them onto this formal language I had been working with the whole time of these precarious protrusions.
Maybe I'm searching for the wrong thing, and I'll let my colleagues jump in here, but there's a building here. It's kind of hidden a little bit. The different models are all slightly different because of the materials you've used to make them. And so the materials, something like that metal one, the materials are kind of slightly dictated to change in the design of this building. But I don't think, I'm getting the impression that the building doesn't matter so much as like the larger aesthetic of almost like dystopian sci-fi narrative you're trying to present, obviously. And even the fact that you've sort of gendered Thesis into a movie poster that could be like we're watching a sci-fi film, just came out. So does the particular design of the building matter? Should I get invested in the plan language you've come up with and the crochet? Or is that sidetracking? Like, are you more interested in like, it's a bit like Levius Woods or something, like a fictional story with some kind of meaning to it.
I think I obviously wanted to convey a lot of energy through my representation and into that power theme, but to me, like, obviously the architecture is the most important to me, and kind of how I got to that point. I think it makes perfect sense how this architecture can exist in maybe the world I've created. Maybe this can exist in this world, and I think it can in a more aggressive sense. But I do think it all kind of fuses together that, this metal materiality that I describe as sun-scorched, these kind of skeletal forms, all of this makes sense within the dry heat of the desert and the remoteness and the danger of it. I think that is what I explored in this board initially, whether I knew exactly what it was going to be at the end of the day. I knew I wanted this very extended dramatic entrance. I knew I wanted some sort of tower. And then through all of the colors and flame, I knew I wanted an element of danger, whether I knew what that was going to be. And then these supplementary collages led to the introduction of the mechanical and the bomb. And this was my first go at dropping a bomb in the pit. So this is a section through the earth. This is like the white tower. You drop the bomb into the hole and then it explodes. So I've been exploring this idea for months and months and months, and my primary focus was how to combine the hole, the tower, the entrance, and why this bomb, like how the bomb is going to interact with this. That was the main goal, and I really dove into that through the formal exploration. Like these were all wooden pieces. I just went into the wood shop, I went into the trash can, and I like played with pieces on my desk for like a week, and then glued them together. And then I ripped apart a projector from the thrift store and also found these cool gold bits in like the tools section. And I reinterpreted what I liked about that first model into the second. And then to make that final third model, I wanted it to be as personal and individual to me as possible. So I looked back through my work, and those plans really stood out with that mechanical theme. So I used the forms that I had generated and really hammered out into making like the most cohesive fusion of these as possible. And then finally, instead of having this whole kind of be away from the architecture, just putting the architecture inside the whole and having it come together in, for me, the most satisfying way. And then as I got into like the diction of describing that interior feeling, I wanted to spend a little more time on the renders, and I wish I did, but I think these convey kind of vaguely what I'm talking about with these really dark shadows, these long twisting corridors, and this kind of grotesque metal that is present around you at every point within the architecture.
I'm kind of glad you didn't delve too much into the renders because I mean I love the work and the breadth of it, and I mean props to you, like this is great. But the only thing that I'm kind of like I was with in the beginning of it being the sublime and how it's going to be beautiful, but also you feel it's significant and small and human. You know, I think that was great. But when I see these renders and the ones that don't have people, I am much more compelled within the narrative because I'm kind of thinking nobody would really want to work here because there's all these bombs coming and going in and out, and you're probably going to get cancer, and you're in a way still damaging the environment. I mean, that's the Navy bombed an island in Puerto Rico, so that's kind of like, I know that nobody would want to be there, right? And people there are still suffering to this day. But I think to take it to the extreme and thinking of something futuristic, maybe this is just, it's still architecture, but it's a machine, and it's just that, and it's just controlled remotely, or it's just, if it's sci-fi, it's just robots running around. But like, having renders without the people, like where we can't really gauge what's big, what's small, and we're just confused and overwhelmed, I think ties a little bit to what you were saying and how big and grand this is. But that maybe is kind of like my maybe a comment to it. I like what you're proposing. I would want to watch this film. I think Christopher Nolan and Denis Villeneuve need to call you so that you make like an Oppenheimer Dune baby together. But yeah, I think I would just think about it in a future without humans. Maybe this world has already been destroyed because Russia and us, we bombed each other, and then only a few survived, and we're really trying to like harvest it for non-violent purposes because we have other concerns. Nobody wants to be there. I don't know, but I love the models. I love the paint. It's so fun. Yeah, maybe that's my 2 cents.
Just to answer a tiny piece of that, I viewed this as, I also thought underwater welding was really cool, how it's a super hazardous job, but the pay rate is extremely high because people die so much. So I kind of viewed this as like, also those posters being kind of like work propaganda to get people to come here, especially with the detonation to salvation. They did end up becoming movie posters, but it's kind of this like lie that it tells you, and then you come here and it's like the most terrible experience of your life. But just like the power of it. I mean, that earthquake when you detonate a bomb, it would be a pretty cool experience.
Yeah, I'm with Joseph about the tectonics of it is still vague for me, and I if I was greedy, I would want a third model. Like, these are still abstractions, right? And the 3D print is an abstraction as well because you've made it very, very small and solid. If you wanted to talk about the building. Because I don't read the plans, I read them exactly, I thought they were landscape gardens. Like, I read them the same way, the hedges or something like that. Or, so taking that and seeing how it figures in there's a lack of translation. So I would, yeah, I'd like to go third model.
I think I'm probably always gonna call for a thesis that situates you within a historical lineage. It's just the way I see thesis, or even the way I see architecture, that I would argue with my colleague Ben that I would argue against them that it's not enough to be simply expressive, because being expressive is potentially historically naive. You know, people have done it before, and there's like nuances of difference. Anyway, so this is all preface to say, like, you could be engaged in a very specific argument with that's going on right now in architecture between Mark Foster Gage and Michael Meredith. Mark Foster Gage is doing really stuff quite like this. That's, to my eye, looks...
Especially the renderings.
Especially the renderings, yeah. They look
These
like,
renderings.
They look like yours in a way. But then he's been in these debates with other leading US architects about what the meaning is of this aesthetic. And for Gage, it's about actually not giving an account of it. He argues that it's just about the seduction of this kind of overwhelming imagery. And then Michael Meredith argues that no, you need some kind of aesthetic discourse in order to interpret and judge things. But interestingly, Michael Meredith says, well, your project is like Star Wars, and my project is like The Office. And like he uses the very image of sci-fi. Like he captures in an instant that Mark Foster Gage's aesthetic is also very sci-fi. And there's a debate going on about that right now in the last 3 or 4 years. And what's at stake in an architectural project that's associated with sci-fi? Like when I look at the building, I think this could be designed by somebody working in Hollywood for Alien 6 or whatever. And the reason that they would design it in this way is precisely because it doesn't really matter whether the tectonics or the load works or the construction works. It's all scenographic. It's all about a sense of like, it's partly scenographic and it's also partly like picturesque and romantic. It's to do with the impression that you have of this like post-industrial chic that you're in. And I think that's where you are. I mean, you said nothing about this kind of thing, but I think you're in a kind of scenographic, picturesque, like post-industrial romantic project.
Well, I think it's a really interesting time, and just talking with some of you in the lobby is that the assertion of authorship against AI, to me, is a sub-context of this. Of where are you, and where is this something you could just prompt mid-journey, and what is kind of the impact of that question? And I think your thesis is that we have to go back to individual expression as a quite literally a man against the machine stance. And to me, it's a kind of a very provocative question.
Well, so I want to respond. Also, Jessica asked me a very similar question. She's like, when you go with the aesthetic of like steampunk or mechanical, it's just an aesthetic, and you have to in a way incorporate that into your design and defend why that should be the aesthetic, purely past the picturesque, and that I think I like how it looks. And I hope to do that with this part to whole mentality, and where there's this hierarchy of the human, then the architecture, then the whole, and then the bomb, and then, as I noted, the infinitely powerful sun, with the bomb being a fraction of the power of the sun. But my point being that the human is this little dispensable, tiny little gear within this massive circuit of generating power, and I believe that is kind of an answer to why this aesthetic works in what I'm doing with my program.
mean, it works, but I guess the worry is that it all makes sense if you're within the discipline of Hollywood. But I guess there are competing taste cultures, and architecture has a taste culture that is based on the question of the tectonics. You know, this is provocative at the level of how this is made, right? Because both in plan and section, it's as if you could make a building by sculpturally carving out of a solid, regardless of where the load paths go. You can just carve out the space. That's a very architectural issue, and it's got nothing to do with aesthetics in a way. I mean, it produces an aesthetic, but it's something that's, you know, there have been arguments about stereotomic versus tectonic approaches to construction. I think in architecture, our taste culture is about how you think about these kind of architectural issues and how you're kind of progressing them. And I think within, I guess what I'm concerned about is like how we as architects actually sort of ultimately derive our taste culture from film. And whether that, I wonder whether that's the case in your project. The thing that's primarily driving your aesthetics is not architectural culture, but actually series of films you've watched, or computer games you've played, or comic books you've watched. And then you tell me if this is the case.
Oh, I mean, there's no hiding from that. But do you view that as a serious problem moving forward for like generations of architects?
Well, it would be a problem. It would be a problem. Several generations later. Let's say, then now you're a teacher, you know, and then your students are teaching their students. There's this, you know, how many layers of de-evolution and, you know, divorcement from our history can we withstand?
But the tectonic, like the architectural questions will keep preventing the slide into totally like divergent fantasy aesthetics. Because
you have to solve.
You have to solve the. You have to build.
Well, no, I'll take the other argument. You don't have to build this. This could all be digital, and
this could be,
you know, our, you know,
That's true.
inhabiting this in the metaverse or whatever it is. I mean, it's a different track for where architecture might go.
Yeah. No, but what I'm saying is that even if you're influenced more by the film culture and, you know, whatever, I'm not as concerned, because if you are influenced by that and then you are going to practice capital A architecture, you're going to make a building, you still have to solve it, right? So, you know, there are questions that you need to answer. So I'm not.
But when you do though, when you answer those questions, you'll be doing something very similar to what Eric Owen-Moss has done, or what Tom Hain has done, or what Larry Woods tried to do. So there are disciplinary questions. You're not the first person to try and develop this aesthetic in architecture. And on questions like, look at Eric Owen-Moss's new building. How did he do it? Like, I mean, the outside looks a bit like this, but probably the inside is a conventional core. So you had to make a decision about where to locate the aesthetic and put it in the concrete on the exterior. And you didn't mess with the elevator shaft and those kinds of things. You know, and maybe your intervention is to mess with the elevator shaft, and then you find a way of doing it, and you do something that Eric Owen-Moss has never done before.
Eric Moss, an interesting. I really appreciate your point about video game culture and film versus architecture. Eric Moss, he lives in a world of like high art, you know, painting and literature, and those are like constantly his references. And I think, which are not architectural in the slightest, but I think, you know, because they're of a certain quality that is probably superior than, you know, a Marvel movie, you know, it can sustain these like architectural translations and abstractions, because there's some, I don't know, kind of transcendental meaning, and as opposed to just like an image.
I guess maybe just building on what Margarita's saying. If you choose whether to be a producer of images compete with AI, produce better images, maybe get a job in Hollywood, or maybe produce video games. Lots of people follow you, but you never deal with some of the difficult architectural questions like the elevator shaft. Yeah, if you choose to do that, then you're kind of fine. But if you do want to build the way Eric or Moss builds and realize something like this, you'll very quickly be dealing with, like, what is this solid white stuff? And how do I carve out of it? And where does the load go continuously down? Where do the pipes go? What keeps this thing warm or cool? I know this is sort of a fantasy scenario, but like if you like the building and want to build this, those are the things which are not trivial. They're the really exciting things where you stand between you and making this amazing building that everybody gets this experience.
No, only like 5 or 3 people a day get to go out of town. The desert, it's gonna be like a volcano, and you have to get a special permit.
I'm thinking he's the next Mark Gage, and he builds this in Dubai and on the river
Build
edge.
this on top of the line.
Yeah.
I
It's
just
a
want to.
luxury hotel in the end, but it's got this amazing aesthetic. You still
It
call
rumbles.
Still call it the Sun God, and no one will know the origin. So.
I just want to say, like, in terms of budgeting time, I definitely painted in like very wide brush strokes, and I wanted to focus on these very grand gestures versus the exact opposite with an integrated studio. That's when I had to work on the plumbing and the structure. And like I can do both, but like when I have the opportunity to do something so fantastical, that's what I spend most of my time on. And if I had another 6 months to develop this, I would make 3 or 4 more of these beautiful drawings. I would have significantly developed floor plans, and better renders in my eyes. But that's just not what I chose to spend my time on. And a lot of this wouldn't exist if I got into the tectonics of this, which I could have and I should have, but that just wasn't my interest for my final gesture to architecture school. And like the modeling was my absolute favorite part, just exploring all these interactions. And it seems so easy that this just exists, but it just takes so much maneuvering and doing and redoing and redoing, and then how to make those come together for this. Like it seems so object oriented, but I was very much thinking about the architecture and these grand gestures of the huge entrance and the cantilevers making you feel tiny, and the tower and what the tower is doing, and the hole, the massive hole. Like I was very much thinking about it, and that is what I hope the project shows. I could get into the details, but I just did not have the time to.
It's a kind of like broader question. It's interesting, again, what you were talking about. With Delirious New York, it seems to me like brings up a whole bunch of issues which are completely outside of the existing discipline and don't have anything to do with architecture, although the subject matter is loosely based around buildings and things that people can occupy. And it was so, it was so exciting and such a like fresh way to look at architecture that he expands the discipline. So I don't know. I don't know that architects simply need to be in dialogue with other architects. Basically, he was in dialogue with Raymond Hood or whoever, but Raymond Hood didn't exactly until Rem, it seems like, belonged to really the historical discipline. It's kind of this extra architectural figure.
And you could say Zaha was in dialogue with Apprentice painting.
Yeah, would there ever be a time in which somebody could legitimately theorize the video game designers of Halo and talk about radical new conceptions of space explored through the video game. It doesn't seem too preposterous, you know. That's my point. But I think it has to go beyond simply this visual style, and it has to have like a relevance to, you know, the world outside of architecture and things like
But there's also a way of just, like, once you, let's say your claim is just you're making an aesthetic, and you're seeding a vision for yourself, like a new imagination that you will then in future career build. You know, so this is a time in which you're incubating this new aesthetic. I still think you could put more pressure on the specificity of what this aesthetic is and how you would describe it, maybe how we should be in a position, and maybe we struggle because we're not necessarily engaging with this kind of aesthetic every day. But when I look at the thing on the right, you know, I see something that looks like a piece of industrial machinery that might be scaled up. You know, I'm looking at this bit here. You know, I could imagine this as something that I might find in my dad's workshop or something, like fragment of a piece at the bottom of like some kit that you would need in the workshop. And so there's something about scale. Like if I can see this as something industrially small and scale up, that is a way I can begin to describe quality. Like, there's a lot of radial fanning going on, both there and in the plan, and I don't necessarily know why, but I guess that speaks to the wheels and the counterweights and stuff. And then the fact that this tower frays into small pieces in different lines that go up. And partly that's a product of you amassing all kinds of small bits and sticking them together, but it's also a claim about the dissolution, vertical dissolution of something as it sort of fades into the sky. How do you get something solid like a building to disappear and become smaller as it do in these pieces? And there are precedents for that, sorry, but there are. Like there are, you know, there's a tower, there's several towers that do this. I mean, this is a very common fantasy of SOM and other like skyscraper makers. They all want to do this. Like, why does everyone want to do this? You know, why isn't a tower just some big solid thing that ends?
I feel myself though wanting to take Mark Foster Gage's side, and you're taking Michael Meredith's side, which is like, but why does it necessarily enhance to have this relationship to SOM and categorize?
Yeah, I'm taking this side
such a
like
way.
everything can actually be, you can describe the qualities and properties of what your imagination is developing. But you can have a reflective relationship with the tendencies in your vision. And it's not just sort of something that you do, but you don't know why. You do, and you're aware of why. And for me, that kind of awareness helps you push.
I would say it doesn't need to necessarily be, you know, discussed out in the open here, but I think what I'm like reading between the lines, what you're saying is that you didn't adequately like address these other skyscraper precedents by SOM or what have you, and that's why the work looks a little flimsy. And
not that like everyone has to go through precedents. It's just that having a kind of self-reflexive relationship with what you're doing. Like, why is my aesthetic this way? And therefore questioning it for yourself. Why, like just having a moment where you realize, oh my God, I just keep doing radial things the whole time. Why do I keep doing that? Maybe I could do something where the radial lines are not. And maybe they curve and they have a fluidity. that you can ask yourself a question that pushes your own aesthetic along because you recognize what you're doing as tropes. That's all. Yeah.
Well, it's, you know, when you, I think if I'm going to just recast this argument, is that you see yourself in relation to, it's not like literally looking at I think Joseph is saying you're just looking at yourself. And if you look at those around you, you actually can see yourself in relationship to something else than just your own reflection.
Yeah. Yeah. The precedents just help you see what you're doing. It's more clear.
And I'm gonna just put your relevance word on ice for our next conversation, because I'm not sure that relevance is critical in this conversation. But I'm gonna put that on ice, because we're done on our time on this one.
Yeah, hopefully it'll come up. Projects.
And one final question. If
Please.
I had precedents of, like, say, formal qualities I had found in built architectures, would that have grounded this in reality?
No, it's not, again, it's not about pinning them up on the wall and being like, look at these precedents.
Okay.
It's about looking at those precedents closely yourself and possibly modifying decisions which to us look decorative and somewhat arbitrary and, you know, right?
For me, it's
And
the question
non-structural.
that got asked to Clayton, what year is your project? Your project is, for me, like sometime in the 90s, because this was happening in the 90s. We were using machine
Or
learning.
1920s, like kind of
Yeah,
Art
I don't know.
Deco.
And so I think it's looking at those to see what happened then and what should happen now, rather than redoing the same thing that they did back then. But at least you learn from those people that didn't do it the right way, right? Because we're not doing it anymore. But to pick up and improve, not always like have to start again at zero. And I think you started at zero in many of these pieces.
Relevance has partially to do with time, like you're saying. People don't dress a certain way these days. Certain things are kind of out.
I can't wear a cravat anymore. I'd like to. Or a top hat.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, I would love that.
You should.
Yeah,
Like
you
the same in
should.
itself.
No, I think you could totally pull it off.
Yeah,
Jess.
it's rugged.
No, but
Or
it's
bowler.
like,
Even
it's
better,
just,
bowler.
it just seems so like over the top, and it's like, look at me, and you can't help it. And even if you don't want to do that, it's just like, stop.
I think all of this is great. You should take it all in. One of my favorite things from what you were reading was this as an architecture for an event, and it was a machine and it functioned, and like I could visualize the bomb dropping, and then it being fed up through the hole itself, or the design, and then it light up the building. And you talked about generators on each level, and it made me think about an architecture not for humans. I know that all these references are mostly architecture design for humans, right? So, but how within those precedents, or what you're referencing in, or what you, even if it's within architecture or film, I don't care, right? How do you think about architecture as an event, or machine-like, or a process-like, and that could really help move it further? Because you're thinking about it, and I understand that you wanted to do more broad strokes, but it could definitely, I mean, this debate conversation is great, because you can situate yourself. How I would think of it is, there's no elevator shaft because we don't need humans, and
Yeah.
I'm trying to think about an architecture that's beyond that, but you would still have to talk about architecture as it is built and how it has, whatever, right? So you should still reference. I don't think that you should not, but I think we should move on as well, but like, I wanted to just put that as well, because my favorite thing was just the event of it all, right? And it is a machine. If a human is there, I don't care.
Yeah, thank you all for your specific feedbacks. It was all very helpful.
Thank you, Ray.